Hello again, welcome to class. Sorry it's been a while, but we're preparing for some really exciting updates to the app, so stay tuned for those. It's definitely time to get back into it though and do some more videos. We've decided to expand our masking series to include masking tips and demos for speech recognition threshold testing and for word recognition score testing, as well as more advanced topics like how to handle air-bone gaps in the non-test ear. So if you're interested in getting those videos, hit subscribe to the channel and get more content. Before we get into all of that, though, we're going to do a new audiogram of the day today where I complete a random audiogram using the class simulator and post it for you all to watch. If you like what you see here, you can also hit subscribe to support the channel. So I'll go ahead and just check random and start practice. We'll create a new random audiogram for me to test. I won't be able to see what it is beforehand. At the end of the video, I'll check this show true audiogram so that we can see what the true thresholds were and see how I do. I'm going to be using the keyboard shortcuts. If you don't see me clicking around in the bottom, that is why. So I'll go ahead and just present, and we hear it. I'm going to use some cheating shortcuts. I'm not going to present the stimulus for the full duration, but if you're trying to do the audiogram the right way, you should make sure that you hold down the stimulus presentation button for the full duration. The program will tell you if you're not holding it down for the full duration, and it will give you a bunch of warnings if you don't do that the right way. So. By default, this program asks you to test 3 and 6K, and so I'm going to just make sure I do that. Good thing I did, because this looks very different than if you don't do those interoctaves. That's something that's really interesting, is the shape of the audiogram looks much more interesting when you add in the interoctaves, like especially 3 and 6K. It just gives you a little bit of extra definition in those high frequency ranges to know what you're looking for. Okay, right ear, we'll switch over to the left ear. This might actually be symmetrical for once. I don't think I've done an audiogram of the day yet that has actually been symmetrical. They've all been kind of really wonky, so we'll see how it all plays out. This is a review. Whenever I'm getting a response, I'm going down by 10, and then when I don't get a response, I go up by 5. So I'm presenting at a level that's high enough for the listener to hear, and then when they hear it, I go down 10 to a quieter level where they probably won't hear it, and then I go up in 5 dB increments to find that quietest level where the patient will respond at least 50% of the time. Something else you'll notice is I'm presenting it and then going down 10, and then when I find the level where they do respond, I'm double checking it, and that's to make sure that they're getting it at least 50% of the time. Technically, you should do 3 presentations to make sure that it's 66% of the time or more, or 4 presentations to make sure that you get 2 or 3 out of 4. But if you get if they respond 2 times out of 2 presentations, you're 100%, especially if they're hearing it 0% at the level below that. You don't need to bother testing it that 3rd time to make sure it's 50%. You technically still should. It's good practice. The program will give you a little nudge to remind you in the output files that you should probably do it 3 times, but you don't have to. All right, so we've done our air conduction thresholds. It looks pretty symmetrical. We've got like a mild to moderate hearing loss. It almost looks flat. It is technically flat in the left ear, but there's a little bit of slope to it as it's going between the different degrees. So you could call that flat, because you could call that sloping, and I don't think anyone would give you too much grief for sloping. So the next step here is to octaves. I don't see any big gaps between frequencies, and so we'll switch over to bone conduction, do some bone tests. Better ear, I would say, but I'll just start with the right ear. Since I'm expecting this to be symmetrical, it should be pretty straight. Or just a little bit above the threshold, the air conduction threshold, since we expect these thresholds to be in good alignment. And I know people are going to give me grief because I just pop over and save it in the other ear as well. But really, there's a theoretical 0 dB interaural attenuation, and so we shouldn't expect to get different bone conduction scores in the test and non-test ears. There's a lot of discussion about whether that is the right thing to do or not, or if you should have runoff, because there's this interesting conductive piece going on right now. So there's a lot of discussion on what symbol you should use to mark it, because, well, if you just save it in both thresholds, does that mean that you really found it in both ears? And that's kind of misleading to say that you found the threshold in both ears when you only really had the oscillator on one side. So, should you use an upside down bracket? Should you use an upside down arrow? What symbol should be used to mark testing in both sides? And that's a topic for debate, and I'm happy to hear your comments in the comments down below. All right, so this is kind of interesting. We've got this high frequency thing going on, a conductive component happening here, and so we need to see if this high frequency conductive component is in both ears or just one. So we'll need to mask these bone conduction thresholds. So there's an air bone gap that's greater than 10 dB, so we're going to turn on masking, and I'm testing the right ear, so I'm going to start at the non-test ear air conduction threshold plus a 10 dB safety pad, and then I need to account for the occlusion effect. But I'm in the high frequencies, so there isn't really an occlusion effect that needs to be accounted for. All the thresholds below here are within 10 dB of their air conduction counterparts, so we're not going to worry about them. So I'll present and I get a response. So I'll raise the masking, There's my 3-level plateau. This is in fact the true threshold. We'll go down to the air conduction threshold of the non-test ear at 4K, add 10 dB safety pad, no occlusion effect that we usually need to account for here. So we'll present. We get a response, raise the masker, and we get no response. So this is kind of an interesting situation, right? Because we presented at a level that should be good masking, and they responded, which means we think that they heard it in the test ear. But just to be sure, we raise the level of the masker again, and we present again, and they responded, so we can be more confident that they're hearing it in the test ear, because we should be really covering up that non-test ear. Okay, so we've got our second level of plateau. We raise the level again and we present, and there's no response. So either we have now covered up the non-test ear, but I'm looking at the gap, the size of this difference here, and I'm thinking we just started over masking. So whenever there's a big difference between the presentation level and the masking level, you need to worry about whether or not that masker is crossing back over and covering up the test signal. So here I've got 70 dB of masking going into the left ear, and that's an air conducted masking noise signal that's crossing over. We assume it loses about 40 dB of interaural attenuation when using TDH50 headphones, which we are for this simulation. So it is crossing over at 70 minus that interaural attenuation of 40, so 30 dB is crossing over into the test ear. So at this point, the masker is being presented at 30, the masker is crossing over test 30, and we're only presenting a tone at 25 through bone conduction. So there's every possibility here that the air conduction signal this bone conduction signal is being covered up by a crossed over air conduction masker that is stimulating the bone conduction system. So at this point, I would say I'm over masking, but I was able to get a 2 response plateau, and so I would just say that this has a very narrow plateau width. I'm going to go ahead and save that threshold as a true threshold and not as a masking dilemma, since I was able to get a 2 threshold plateau. We'll see if that was the right thing to do when we unveil the true audiogram. So now we'll switch ears and see if what happens when we mask the left ear. We'll do the non-test ear air conduction plus 10. We'll present, raise the level of the masker, raise the level of the masker. We get our 3-level plateau, so we'll save that. Air conduction threshold of the non-test ear plus 10. Present, we get a response, raise the masker, and same thing here, a 2-level plateau. And so I'm going to go ahead and save it, add the masking here for my 2-level plateau, and I think we're done here. So we'll check the audiogram. It looks pretty symmetrical, but there's this high frequency conductive component. Let's see what happens when we show the true audiogram. All right, I crushed it. There's nothing different there. So the 2-level plateau was true. It wasn't a masking dilemma. Otherwise, those thresholds remain unmasked. And so we did a good job today. So that's all I've got for you. If you have any questions on why I did what I did, or if you would have done something differently, feel free to let me know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to see more content like this. See you next time.